We are live on the KSO show from Derek Young's apartment. You should be able to see me through my webcam on my computer. I'm going to shoot over to Derek so you can see him right now. Have a little setup.
And if you're not watching live right now, you're listening to the KSO show as usual in podcast form. So this is still the KSO show. We're just trying out a YouTube live at the same time, and we are in my apartment for it as we, wrap up another Tuesday press conference for Kansas State as they're in a bye week, just coming off the loss against Arkansas State. They have a bye week, and then they'll play Oklahoma on September 12th. Something I'll touch on briefly. We won't dive into it with anything in depth, but there is all of a sudden we're seeing reports. It is out there of maybe perhaps a COVID outbreak with Arkansas State. So we don't know if that has any impact on Kansas State and what their numbers are right now. That still hasn't been released at the time that we're recording. So that's where we are with that. But because we don't have any details as to if that's affected K-State or not, we probably won't dive into it too much further, but probably something to be mindful of and to think about and consider. Although Kansas State does have, almost 2 weeks till they play again when they go to Norman to play the Sooners, where Oklahoma looked mighty good against Missouri State. They were pretty thin as well because of everything that has been transpiring, but Spencer Rattler was on one and lit up the Missouri State Bears quite a bit. We'll move to the Tuesday press conference, and we spoke to Chris Kleiman today and also to players Briley Moore and Drew Wiley in the first segment. As always on these Tuesdays, and we started it last week, we'll talk. The first segment will be about Chris Kleiman and what he had to say. And I guess my overall reaction from what we heard from Chris Kleiman and everything is that he was still felt uncertain because there is no certainty just on who's going to be at practice every day. So I think that's part of the deal still, and I think I don't want to say that makes him defeated, but I think that makes him just kind of unclear, and finds it challenging to give direction to his football team when there's no consistency involved. And I think that's what every coach is kind of going through in this, wacky season, so to speak, that might even have the Big Ten revving up here shortly. So that's one response I had. Before I'll go back to Flando here, I think another thing that I had is he's visibly and audibly still frustrated and disappointed. And I thought he was a little bit the most critical about the football team that he's been in his short tenure at Kansas State. It makes sense, this is probably their most disappointing performance, but he said, you'll hear the sound bites in later on or briefly here in a minute of this podcast, but he voiced his frustration a little bit with Skylar Thompson and how he has to be better. It's not just Skylar Thompson, but that was a detail of the game. And if you're in the second string and you're at the third string, your number's probably going to be called this year, and you better show up if it is.
And you hinted on it right away. I say we get to that soundbite here right now. Obviously, we're doing YouTube Live. First time we've really done this, during a press conference, but we have the ability to get sound bites in here. So I got 3 of them. You'll hear from Kleiman on all 3. And yeah, that first one was basically Kleiman talking about, this is after Kellis Robinette questions. You might even see Kellis asking the question real quick. But you'll see Kleiman explain how he felt Skylar's performance was and how the team needed to be better as a whole.
I was curious, when you went back and got to, rewatch things and take it all in, how would you rate the way Skylar played, putting up some pretty good numbers, but also barely missing on some of those throws?
Yeah, he needs to play better. He knows that. He made some really, really good throws, made some really good reads. He was banged up. I think everybody saw that in the second half. But Skylar will respond, and everybody needs to play better. It doesn't matter if you're an O-lineman to the quarterback to the safeties to linebackers, D-line. Everybody does, and so we all need to improve.
So yeah, I mean that was Kleiman talking about that everyone needs to play better, and it's not just all on Skylar. And I think that is a theme that needs to be talked about because a lot of people put a lot of blame on Skylar, including you and I. We put a lot of pressure on the quarterbacks, and not that Skylar takes some blame, but he wasn't the only guy that had a poor game on Saturday, and probably not even the worst game. He wasn't necessarily poor all around, but he did miss on a few important passes that would have been the difference in the game. But there's many things that could have happened, not just on Skylar's part, that could have changed the outcome of this one.
Yeah, I mean, that's why Skylar's gaffes, miscues, mistakes, errors, that's why they are so prominent. That's why they are so eye-popping. That's why they are, they're in your face. Because the mistakes he had, I guess, because sometimes it's hard to make sense of Skylar's struggles because the throws he missed on, not only were there throws clearly within his ability to make, and we've seen him make those throws before, but they were the throws that could have put points on a board. You're taking points off the board when you're making the kinds of mistakes that he was. So his mistakes, I guess, seem more, increased, expanded, more prominent, more impactful, because his mistakes were taking points off the board. And not only that, they were probably what some would consider some easier throws. I mean, the one to Sebastian Taylor where he threw it over the wrong shoulder, he had the entire field at his disposal to deliver the ball. So it's things like that. And then you have to like make sense of it by knowing that he also can make the difficult throw, the touchdown to Phillip Brooks to open the game up and take a 7-0 lead. That was a dime and a very complicated throw. That was a more complicated throw than the ones he misses. So his inconsistency and just hard to make sense of his ups and downs is part of it. And I think that's frustrating for a lot of fans, and it elevates his errors a little bit more than the others because you're literally taking points off the board when he's not connecting on a few of those tosses. Like, kind of moving on from that, I thought something that another item that Chris Kleiman covered that kind of stood out to me today is the tough conversations that were had. It sounds like they haven't practiced yet since Saturday. It's a bye week, so that's normal. They'll get back to practice on Tuesday, which was today. But at the time we spoke to Kleiman, they hadn't practiced yet. They didn't practice on Monday. They didn't practice on Sunday, but it sounded like it was filled of numerous meetings, whether it be unit meetings, team meetings, position meetings, all kinds of those things. That he met with the leadership council. It sounded like those were productive meetings, that there's positive movement out to those, and I think that they need to, like he said, need to tighten the ship a little bit. I think that's not to say that they were letting everybody run roughshod or anything of that sort. But usually when you have something of a disappointing performance, there's usually numerous factors that kind of play into that, and I think they kind of wanted to address all those. And so I think that there were some real tough conversations had. Kleiman said that there was. I've also, keyed in with a few sources that have indicated the same. And I think that some of those conversations, while tough, were definitely necessary.
No doubt about it. I mean, and there's just a lot of things that this team needs to work on going into a bye week. As Kleiman stated in the press conference, that a bye week is a time where you can focus on different things to make sure you shore things up. And one of the biggest problems that the defense had on Saturday was the secondary, and you had a great question regarding that to Kleiman. So I guess, let's let Kleiman talk about you'll hear Derek's question and see him as he's asking Kleiman what to do on the secondary level, and then we'll talk more about it here in a second.
And with your safeties, you're kind of dealing with some injuries, not with just Jerome McPherson, but Wayne Jones as well. Is there any others that you're going to really try to ramp up and get ready for conference play?
Well, another guy that we were counting on that wasn't available was Ross Elder. Ross has had a terrific camp and has played some football for us, so we hope to get him back in the near future as well. We have to continue to improve at safety, both the free and the strong. We have to continue to build depth so that We have more guys that can play 20 snaps, 30 snaps, and not have to rely on somebody playing 70 snaps. But it's a position that we have some young players that we think are talented, but there's a lot of nuances to playing in the secondary at the college level, and especially in our scheme. And even though we need to simplify it so those guys can play, it's still, and Coach Kleinman and I have been together for a long time of understanding, are you ready to play in that moment? And you have to prove that you're ready by how you perform at practice and making sure that you do know the reads and do know the calls and do know the communication. And if guys in our mind aren't comfortable in that in practice, they sure aren't going to be in the game. That's why we also have this open week, and hopefully everybody will be healthy to be able to practice, that we can get some more guys that are younger players some repetitions.
Yeah, so Derek, I mean, Kleiman laid it out right there pretty impressively. I think that's exactly, I mean, how it looked. Guys need to be better, and you wish you had more depth at that position, but right now it's just not the case.
And part of that's just injuries and other circumstances. Jonathan Alexander opted out. That took away his safety. Ross Elder wasn't available. That took away his safety. John McPherson got hurt and really early in the game, near the first or second series. That took away his safety. Wayne Jones got injured late in the game. That took away his safety. I mean, you're down your top four safeties at that point, and that's why you're relying on Ryan Hennington, while you're relying on Brock Monty. And that's your fifth and sixth safeties. 7, 8, 9 didn't get in. That's Tyron Lewis. That's Morris Brown. And that is Malachi Mitchell. Morris Brown did play some special teams. Tyron Lewis played some special teams, but it didn't sound like those two have really showed enough in practice to make the coaches comfortable enough playing them in the game. And that's probably not an indictment on those players' development either. They're still freshmen and redshirt freshmen, and you know, everyone progresses at a different rate, and they're just not ready. It may not matter. They might have to play against Oklahoma anyways. Let's go on to, a different topic and not a whole lot of detail to it. I asked Coach Kleiman why we didn't see more Tyler Burns. He only had 1 or 2 carries. He was someone they said would probably share the lion's share of the carries with Harry Trotter. That didn't come to fruition. I asked Coach Kleiman why that wasn't the case. And frankly, he said that it's just the way the game went. The game flow dictated less Tyler Burns, is how he answered that, and said how they never got to really play with the lead. So it sounds like when they get a lead, they really want to chew clock, and they'll use Tyler Burns in those cases, apparently. And that's his situational usage. So maybe he's not going to be someone that gets the lion's share of the carries this year. It's very unclear how that's going to move going forward. Our last soundbite has to do with Coach Kleiman basically saying that they're not looking for the easy fix, the quick fix that maybe plugs a hole but doesn't right the entire ship. They're looking to right the entire ship. They're looking to instill a culture. They're looking to implore their values, their core methods, their principles, and their philosophies into this program. And in year 2, that's still underway. And if you are in year 2 and maybe you're looking to job hop, so to speak, maybe you do look for the quick fix just to get that record to where you want it, so that maybe it looks better than what it really is. But Coach Kleiman's not interested in that, and he made that clear today. He considers this as a marathon and not a sprint at Kansas State. He's in Manhattan for the long haul. He made that very clear today, and he wants to keep instilling the culture and philosophy the way he wants. And I'm sure Flano's probably ready to play that soundbite right now.
If I were in year 8, I'd say let's try to throw some gimmicks in there. Let's try to fool some people. But we're in year 2. And so we are going to follow our philosophy and rules and principles, even if that is playing at a position where we're down, if that's playing at somewhere where we're not as equipped as we are in other spots, because this is an absolute marathon for me here and not a sprint. I'm not sprinting to say I have to do this so that I can go get another job, or I can do this, or I can help this. We as a staff are making sure that this is a marathon so that we as a staff are here for the long term. And I'm not a quick fix guy. That'd be different if I said, hey, let's go get 15 JCs because we don't know if we're going to lose guys. We're going to go get 15 D1 transfers. That's not my philosophy. That's not our philosophy. Excuse me, our philosophy as a program and as a staff. So we've had this conversation as a staff on Sunday. Do we get to the gimmicky? Do we do this? And we all collectively as a staff said, this is who we are, and this is who we have been at a previous institution, and we aren't going to change that. And so are we going to maybe take some lumps periodically this year? We may have to, because I don't want to say, come spring of 21, all right, let's go back to what we wanted to try to do, because now I think you've lost a ton of time.
So yeah, I mean, Kleiman laid it out there pretty well, and I think that's the right call for Coach Kleiman and this staff to do. You don't want to panic. You don't want to try to throw in things that you don't know if are going to work, just to try something different. When you have a philosophy, you should definitely, especially in year 2, spend time focusing on getting the players that you have bought into your system staying on track with your system.
Yeah, it was a great answer. For those that love Chris Kleiman, it's probably a reassuring answer, as he made clear that he has every intention of remaining in Manhattan for the long term, and he's ready to throw down roots and instill a culture that's going to survive for several years, maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades. That sounds similar to what Bill Snyder did at Kansas State, and I think maybe they do things a little bit differently than one another, but they kind of have the same goals and the same visions. Alike, and that's probably reassuring for Kansas State fans. In terms of what Chris Kleiman had to say, I think we've pretty much recapped everything and the finer points of his press conference on this Tuesday. And when we come back, after this was segment 1, we're wrapping up right now. When we come back, we'll give you segment 2. Or actually, we're going to stay right on because we're YouTube Live. So we'll move to segment 2 right now. But and that's what we heard from the players. Typically, we hear from 3, 4, sometimes 5 players. It's a bye week, so a little bit less this time. We heard from tight end Briley Moore. We heard from defensive tackle Drew Wiley. And Drew Wiley had one of my favorite quotes today, to be honest. And it was, you wish you didn't have to have this quote. But if things look like the way they did Saturday, then there's probably a sense of, you're glad that he felt this way. But Drew Wiley came out and said, to be honest, it absolutely sucked watching the film of that one. And really, it should. It wasn't pretty. I didn't really think the defensive tackles were that bad, in all honesty. But as a team, that should have sucked. And that should have stung. And they should feel a little disappointed. Not a little, probably a lot disappointed, but feel some pain from watching that film because it was not pretty.
Yeah, I mean, I think Drew Wiley came on and said exactly what you need to say after a tough loss, and a guy that's been in the program for a few years now, and now he's getting significant snaps. I mean, he did last year, but this year even called on more. And I thought I really liked Wiley. I mean, it was the first time I think I really ever got to interact with him and see how he conducted himself. And you're right, that answer was as good as it gets. I mean, you don't want this team to be all the way down in the dumps, and they're not. It doesn't seem like that way at all, but you also don't want them to not be upset with a loss like that. And I think Drew Wiley showed that. And Briley Moore, maybe a little different. He was also getting asked a lot about the positives because he had a good game. Briley Moore did, so he was getting asked about how it felt to be in his first K-State game ever, making completions, a lot of questions about Skylar Thompson and his connection. But still, you could tell once it came down to it, once questions were asked more about the game at hand and losing to Arkansas State, it still wasn't necessarily happy times for Briley Moore either.
No, and he mentioned that there was a lot of emotions in his first game, but he did what the coaches always say, kind of one of their mottos, control what you can control. And he enjoyed his first game at Kansas State, but you could tell that it didn't mean as much to him because it didn't result in a win. And he kind of critiqued himself. And, yeah, I think that there was some satisfaction for Briley Moore to play the way that he did, and he played pretty well. I think there was some satisfaction to kind of get that first game under the belt and go for go as well as it did individually for him, but I don't think it was as much satisfaction as maybe what he was anticipating because of what the final result was. And then the final, and this is the last thing I have with the players. I thought we heard our first kind of compliment of Ronald Triplett. I thought that was kind of impactful to me. Drew Wiley was talking about some of the younger players that he thought were going to eventually be very good players for Kansas State, even if they weren't now. And some of those were, guys that played on Saturday, which makes sense. Deuce Vaughn, Felix Anudike, defensive end, but he kind of lined up, I think, at defensive tackle and jet packages. Quarterback Will Howard, he played. Safety Morris Brown played on some special teams, and I think there was another true freshman that played. You got Vaughn Howard, Anudike, Morris Brown, and I'm forgetting one, but it doesn't matter at this point. But he mentioned that, they got other guys that are going to play. T.J. Smith's another one to play. T.J. Smith will be good. He likes what he's seen from T. Denson. He mentioned T. Denson's name. He mentioned Ronald Triplett's name. And defensive tackle's not exactly in the best spot right now, so I think it's kind of reassuring to hear that Ronald Triplett has a chance to be a very good defensive tackle because of the fewer bodies that they kind of have remaining on the roster right now. Probably a little bit slimmer than they would have hoped at this point. That kind of puts more pressure on some of those recruiting pickups to hit, and it sounds like Ronald Triplett is on its way to hitting. And that's really all I got when it comes to the players. Usually in the third segment, I'll drop in a nugget here and there. And the only thing that I have, and I haven't actually put this on the board yet, and maybe I should at some point, is they talked about those tough conversations, and I have spoken with a couple of sources kind of on those tough conversations. To be honest, and they came unprovoked because I wasn't necessarily seeking out the information, nor did I want to, because that seemed a little bit of a private matter. But I will share what I was told unprovoked about those tough conversations, those tough meetings that taken place on Sunday and again on Monday, yesterday, is that, and it wasn't really detailed, so maybe this won't be much to anyone, but they said that it was one of the most impactful meetings that they've had since being at Kansas State. And they thought that it was necessary and it was needed, and that it was the most significant, impactful meetings they've had at Kansas State, the most significant and impactful conversations that they've had since they've been at Kansas State. So you could take that one of two ways. One, it's like, does that mean we're in panic mode? I don't necessarily take it that way, and I don't think it was meant that way. I think it was meant that they've taken another giant step forward and they're really growing together and progressing forward together. And, tough people, make tough times make tough people, and sometimes tough conversations need to be had, and that's how you grow, and that's how you become better. Sometimes, the real bad struggles and the real bad incidents and events, games, whatever it may be, makes people better, and maybe this makes the team better. And it's unfortunate that it took a loss to Arkansas State, but maybe it's the necessary thing to do at this point.
Yeah, I think it's about as good as you can say it. It's really a tough loss for Kansas State, and it's not going to be easy to get over. But now they have 2 weeks to get over it and prepare for a really, really tough Oklahoma team. And something I think Kleiman, last thing I would say on the press conferences is just that, no excuses, but for every team in the country, this is still a different year with COVID and everything else going on. There's so many different variables with how teams are going to be affected. Arkansas State was affected with the virus after and some before the game even, because they were without guys that they had. So it's going to affect each team each week, I do believe. It affected K-State tremendously, I think, being their first game going up against Arkansas State. But, yeah, that's pretty much all I got. This was YouTube Live. Won't be doing this, every time for KSO shows, but thought might as well try it out after this Tuesday edition. Throwing some sound bites, and we got ourselves a little 25-minute video to throw up for you guys. You can check out this later too. If you jumped in late and you want to see it, what we talked about earlier, this will be a recording on our YouTube. And if you enjoyed this, if you like this, we can always try to do this more often. And also, it's a good way, if you'd like, to be able to interact with us if we give you more of a heads up too. when we are doing live. So unless DY has anything else, I think we're going to wrap this thing up. For Derek Young, I'm Grant Flanders. This was the KSO Show on YouTube Live.